Hey there, welcome back to another episode of the Working Mama podcast. This is your fellow working mum and also host of the Working Mama podcast, Karina O'Brien. It's great to have you here. And if you're a first time listener, welcome. If you've been listening before, welcome back. This week is a really special episode. A little while ago, I put the call out on LinkedIn about sharing working mum stories. And one lady who I've been connected with online on LinkedIn for a little while who answered the call was Lisa Judson. And you think that school drop-off is tough in the city? Well, try doing it with 2 kids, 170 acres of farmland, no running water from mains, and a 90-minute commute to work. And this is seen as short. So today we're heading to regional Western Australia to meet Lisa Judson, a working mum, farm business consultant, and all-round powerhouse. Lisa doesn't just juggle work and parenting. She does it while managing a hobby farm, dealing with spotty phone reception, and navigating daycare logistics most of us can't even imagine. In this episode, we're unpacking what it really looks like to raise a family and build a career in the country with honesty, humour, and a whole lot of grit and a whole lot of raw truths. I honestly loved this chat with Lisa, and I really hope you do as well. So feel free to share it with your friends and other working mums who you think also might be interested. So let's get into it. Welcome, Lisa. Welcome to the Working Mama podcast. How's your day going so far?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Karina. I've just started my second shift. So got back from the school bus and sitting here in a cold house. It reminds me I must get onto the firewood thing ready for winter.
I love how you say the second shift. So that's
Yeah,
very good.
I don't know why this shift this morning was so hard, but for some reason everybody had other ideas other than getting to school. So yeah, we made it.
My kids were the same. I was like, can you just get your shoes on? They just wouldn't get out of the house.
Yeah, we do. It hasn't happened a lot, but when the school bus drives away, I just turn around and go, that was your fault.
Now, you're not from the city, are you? You're from the
No.
country.
Yeah, so we are located about 2 hours from the centre of Perth, out in the wheat belt. Lovely spot. We've been here about 10 years. I grew up not far away. My husband's originally from New Zealand in the South Island. And we set up here just because we had to put down roots. We were kind of growing up and we hadn't really done anything in terms of figuring out where we wanted to go and where we wanted to be. And yeah, so it's very normal for me to be in the wheat belt. I have lived in the city for about 10 years when I first left school, but yeah, this is definitely home. And it's a really old place. So we live in a house that was built in about 1890. And unfortunately, it doesn't have any ghosts. So I was really excited when we moved in that we might have ghosts. We don't seem to have any, but it has always felt like home. And it's a really strange concept to go to a new house and it just feels like home. But yeah, we love it here. It's a lot of work. I don't think I'd recommend it to lots of people, but yeah, it's great.
Why is it a lot of work?
Well, we have not just the house, we have a hobby farm as well. So we've sort of done it in 2 tranches, but now we've got about 170 acres. My husband Duncan plants like oat crop, hay crop every year. We sell a bit of domestic hay. We've got a few sheep. We probably want to do that a bit more, but it's a bit up in the air with the live export ban. But the idea is that we'll trade sheep and the kids will be able to see that process of fattening out and selling off and that kind of thing. Yeah, so between firewood and trying to keep water up to the house, because we aren't on scheme water, we only have rainwater, so we often have to buy it in if we have a dry summer. We also help my mum and dad supply some firewood to their house as well. So winters, weekends are always about trying to keep that up. And then I have a horse as well, and dogs and cats and things like that. So it's just the work.
Wow. It sounds like I know what it's like just to keep a household with going, but then you're also keeping, over 100 acres plus a livestock. That sounds like a lot.
Yeah, we joke it's a 100-acre garden because you don't use, I mean, even though we do use a bit of machinery, a lot of it is chainsaw and rolling things up by hand and, tidying up with a wheelbarrow. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but yeah, it keeps us honest.
Yeah. And so you've got 2 kids, but also you've got a job as well. So you're obviously not just on the farm. What's been your career journey to where you are today?
So I'm a farm business consultant now. I've dabbled in a bit of community development. I started out in financial planning. I've done natural resource management, and I spent a long time in agri-finance as well. So probably three quarters of it's been in the regions, but I did spend the first kind of 10 years down in Perth studying and working and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's quite varied. I have always kind of navigated back to agriculture because it's what I grew up with and it's quite familiar. And yeah, it's exciting. There's lots of things happening in ag that are really promising, and it's nice to kind of be a part of it. And especially when I have clients, and same with my old job, I had clients as well. So you just got to experience their business, and you didn't get siloed into this channel of just your own experience. So that's very cool.
That's pretty amazing. So what's been the experience like for you as a working mum living regionally? Because we know there's a lot of challenges in the city, but I've even heard of, like the childcare droughts and things like that in the regional areas. And on the podcast, I will be honest, actually, I think you're one of the very first regional people I've actually spoken to share their experience. So I was so excited when you reached out because I know it's different and you have different probably focuses and challenges compared to the city.
Yeah, I had a really honestly the most fantastic line manager when I went on my first parental leave and was returning to work. And he was very hands off in terms of it was my decision about when I came back. And I remember him ringing me once, and I was picking weeds in the paddock. I had the capsule inside of an old ute, and I think Hallie was only about 12 weeks old. And he said, "Oh, so just wondering how you feel about coming back." And I said, "Oh my God."
3 months old. Wow.
Yeah. He's like, part time, full time, what do you feel like? And I was like, and I sort of panicked a little bit and extended it for 6 months. And we we got to a position where we were heading into a busy season at work. So he really did need me back. And I knew that was a date that was coming. And I said, "Can you just help me find someone in our massive organization that works full time with kids under 3?" And I said, "And doesn't live in a regional center." And he said, "All right, yep, no, I'll make some calls." And I reached out to my network and I couldn't find anyone. So there was a girl in South Australia who was lovely, but she worked 4 days a week. She lived in a big regional centre, and her husband worked for someone and had quite defined hours, so could do sort of some school drop off pickup. But she said, the daycare was often booked out. She had to use private nannies who often let her down. And then the other girl, I rang her and she's like, "Oh, don't do it. I'm about to quit." Between her husband's farm and a 75K commute to work, she said, "I think I'm going to buy a business and work from home." So I really couldn't find anyone. And I went back initially part time, and then some things happened. And my manager said to me, "Oh, look, if you can just fit in any other hours work, I'll pay you for that. And we'll revisit in 3 months." And at the end of the 3 months, he was quite forward. He said to me, "Are you planning on having more kids?" And I went, "You can't ask that, but yeah." And he said, "Well, you've just clocked up on average full time hours for the last 12 weeks, juggling it however you are. So if you want to make it happen, think of your 40 hours in 7, not 5 days, and continue to make it work like you have done. You've got a fantastic assistant. I'll give you all the support I can." And I just went, "All right." And he said, "Because it'll be better for you. You'll get full time parental leave, you'll earn full time super, you'll earn full time leave." And he said, "You'll need it with 2 kids in daycare because they'll just get sick." So he knew what I was up against, but it very much worked for him that I came back full time.
How do you feel going back full time?
I just attended it like another project. I broke it down into sections. I was like, right, what do I need to do first? Although our daycare was open 5 days, it only opened from 8:15 to 5:30, I think, and I had a 45K commute to there, and then if I was going to the office, I had another 45Ks on top of that. So the office days were 180K round trip, so about an
And
hour
how
and a
long would that
half.
take?
Yeah, so it was probably on a good day when we went rushing, probably 45 minutes to the daycare and another 40 minutes to the office.
Wow.
It sort of was on the cusp of where a lot of my clients' farms were. So if I was going out on farm, I was closer, and it was easier for me to get back to this town. And there was a whole lot of other things. Like, I didn't grow up with daycare. There just wasn't community
Mm.
daycare when I was a kid. We did play dates. And so going to a corporate daycare in a bigger regional centre didn't appeal. And I also had a really old friend of mine that was at this community daycare, and she said, "Look, my kids are 4, they can talk, yours can't. I'll be able to tell you what happens on the floor of daycare." And so it just was really nice knowing that I was dropping off a 9-month-old, but I had not only a 19 placement daycare, the women there were very consistent that worked there. And, we formed some really great friendships. And the other thing is my husband and I could see the kids that our kids were going to be hanging out with were the same as us. The families were the same. We
Mm.
did the same things. We had the same values. So that was really amazing. And I remember Harley was probably about 12 months old, maybe 15 months. And one of the daycare ladies pulled me aside at pickup and another mum as well and said, "Do you know your boys have formed quite a close friendship?" And I was like, "Great, that's why he's coming to daycare." Like I kind of dismissed it. And she said, "No, that's really unusual for under threes to form really close friendships. And it's boy friendships are really important. So I think you guys need to foster this." And the other mum and I knew each other, but we weren't super close. But we've definitely made an effort to foster that friendship. And they don't even go to the same school anymore. During COVID, they used to write postcards to each other.
Oh,
And they're very, very sweet. And they have little fights and they're very opposite in personality, but they're just such great mates. So yeah, some things that come out of daycare are just really surprising. And that community daycare had lots of challenges in that, I remember when he was probably 18 months old, rocking up, from the first shift, 45 minutes to daycare, to a sign on the gate saying, "Hand, foot, and mouth is going around. Be aware of symptoms." And I was like, great. If I had known about this 45 minutes ago, I could have rearranged my day, taken him on farm with me. All I've got is document sign-ups that we'll be doing on boots of tractors and, wheels and stuff like that. He can come with me. And it was just so frustrating because they were in this cycle that sort of everybody lived locally and could just read the notices they went in. It's heaps better now, but that was, and it's even with school. I mean, everybody complains about school, but the comms are just really challenging. They don't support working families at all, I think.
oh, all the notifications and things like that. Even last night, I've got a WhatsApp group with my U level, and we were trying to piece together information because the kids in
Yeah,
grade 1 don't come home with that much. They all they care about. And I'm like, and we're all going, okay, what's this little slip? Oh, that's the Premier's Reading Award. Okay, what's this? What's that? And we're literally trying to piece together communication
yeah.
because we hadn't heard about it. And then this morning, oh, there's a compass alert about it. I'm like, that would have been good 2 days ago.
Oh, absolutely. And the frustration is there, but what I've done is join the board, become chair, and so now I drive a communication policy, and it's a massive pet project of mine to improve that for everyone. But I think the thing with daycare as well is that it's so good and you don't realize it until you're
Mm.
not in it. We only really did it 2 days a week. Our eldest didn't really cope with how full on it was. Our youngest could have been there for 7 days a week and not cared. So my mum helped a lot. My mum and dad were willing and able. They're only 100 k's away. So we used to get them
You
over or
say
meet
only
them.
100 k's away. Everyone's like, that's a bit of a distance.
Yeah, so they're an hour. So I'm sure people live on different sides of the city and an hour away, but they would come over once a week or once a fortnight. I had one of my mum's school friends was a nanny for a while. A girl down the road who was studying came one day a week, and they were just Harley's quiet days at home where he could rest and recover. And then I kind of juggled things in between. But we honestly got on this cycle of 2 days worth of daycare, sick, 24 hours later. I would stay home for about a week. Then mum would come to give his immune system a bit of a break, and then we'd start the cycle again in week 3.
Oh, that would have been exhausting.
So and then I just planned it. I was like, oh, we're going to get sick in 3 weeks. Better not book that meeting. I'll book it for the good week and pile up the meetings on those 2 days. And yeah, I mean, my husband used to joke, we'd walk in the door from daycare and he'd go, "Oh, what a bowler have we got this week? Is it rabies? Is it Ebola? Is it the bird flu? Like, what are you bringing home from daycare this week, mate?" And we had to kind of stop those jokes when COVID came because they weren't funny anymore. But even as they get older, Tyne, she used to say to me, 'cause she loved being at daycare, we used to joke, "Make sure you put your shoes through the foot trough on the way out," which is something you do with sheep, in terms of drenching and cleaning them off before you sell them. Put your feet through the sheep trough on the way out. And she used to yell out to the daycare ladies on their way out, like, "I just got to clean my shoes on the way out," Dad said. So yeah, it's just so sick. And I remember, we'd all get a little bit sick, but my husband would end up on horse antibiotics, and our GP used to just laugh at him because he had no resistance to anything. But we're all a bit better now.
Yeah, once you've gone through, I think the daycare viruses and things like that, it sets you up probably well. Is it better at school now?
Oh yeah, completely. Like there'll be some Ebola go through school and he just gets like a sniffle and is a bit quiet for a day here and there. But honestly, my mum and dad did so much. Little things like dad would take the rubbish away. We don't have rubbish collection. So he would handle all our household rubbish and mum would come and do my ironing. She would buy Christmas presents for me when I couldn't get them online. Just lots of errands and stuff like that. You get home to a cooked meal. And her mum did a lot for her, like when we were growing up, with no daycare and things. But yeah, honestly, couldn't do it without her. Lots of people are jealous of me, and rightly so. They should be because they do a lot. And even like when I first went back to work, my husband's mother came over for like a month and just looked after us. We remember not being able to find dishes in our cupboard, and they were in the bottom of our freezer full of a homemade pie. She just cooked and cleaned and been here and kept the house going. So yeah, it was all those kinds of things helped in the early days. But I honestly, it's not for the faint hearted for sure. And we've got through the other end. So this year we're finally in 2 times full-time school. So last 3 years, I've had 2 kids in 2 different towns with school hours. So,
How does that go? How does that even work logistically? Because even I know like trying to do childcare and school drop off is hard enough, but in two different towns, and I'm sure they're not a few kilometers away.
yeah, so they were 45 kilometers away. I have an amazing group of school mums that, oh yeah, I'll have them after school. That's fine. And, I'd sort of throw them some food or do their click and collect shopping for them or whatever. I also had this amazing farm-based mum in the early days, and she probably parented very similar to me. I felt very comfortable with my kids being in her house, and she would just have them all day and they'd sleep. She had pretty tight nap schedule, which I was really happy about. And, she had 4 kids. So to go from 3 at school and 1 at home and then chuck 1 or 2 of mine in there was not a big drama for her. And I certainly lent into those. I think my husband was always a little bit bewildered at how much I was happy to ask for help, but it's just what we had to do. And then logistically, it was crap. I mean, I had to leave the office on an office day in time to get back to meet the school bus, to then pile the eldest into the car to drive, 45 minutes one way and then back again to pick up from daycare. There was a lot of dinners in the car, a lot of pick plate dinners. In the early days when they were babies, dinner in the bath because then I don't have to clean up anything, just wash it down the drain. Yeah, and you get very, very minimalist in everything. So, minimum amount for dinner. I think our youngest has a few problems with eating things like casseroles and stuff with sauces in it because I was just like, there's some vegetables and there's some meat and you'll be fine. And there was nothing ever very fancy about it. I have used a mum who does some catering from home to cook meals because then I'm not emotionally attached to the work that went into dinner prep. And if they eat it, they eat it. If they don't, they don't. I have another friend up the road who does beautiful baking, and she used to do these bake boxes, which we named husband care packages. And I'd buy them at the start of term. She'd cook up everything that could be freezable that my husband liked, and it just sat in the big freezer. And then when he was packing his lunch in the morning to go out on farm, he at least had something, and it was, his care package basically.
That's amazing. It sounds like you've got such a good community to help make it work for you that, yeah, as you said, asking for help. And it's amazing because so many times as mums, I don't know what it is, sometimes we just get proud of, oh no, we need to think that we do it all and we can, and we don't ask for help. But when really deep down, we wish that we were being offered or we're too afraid. But it's awesome that, yeah, asking for help is a strength, not a weakness.
And I suppose it was bought out of necessity as well. And there was just a couple of things at work that really worked. So I had this girl who was in my team, but she wasn't working directly with me or anything. And she had older kids. And I think she looked at me at the start and realized that the basket case that I was building of trying to work full time with the travel and the job and little kids, she became my work wife. And so working in a big corporate, there's lots of grey matter in your calendar. There's lots of crap that you do that's just of no value. And she started intercepting things for me. So replying to emails on my behalf, giving me the heads up that these 3 emails we just got were irrelevant. Don't worry about reading them. Or here's the summary. If there was information we had to return into head office for something, she'd go through and do my portfolio for me. So there was just admin like that. And I also had two really great assistants after my first parental leave. A girl I'd worked with for a really long time. She just knew what to do and stepped up. And so when I logged in at 7:30 at night and did 3 or 4 hours, there was a very succinct list, and she was very bossy. And these are the 4 things I need to move these deals forward. And then the second time around, I had a young guy, and he used to ring me at like 5:30. And at one point I said, mate, that is like the worst time of day to call me. Call me at 8 and let's have a conversation then. So he got trained pretty quickly. I said, can you even hear me talking? I've got one kid screaming and the other one screaming at the other one because the other one's screaming.
Yeah.
And and so, we started having much more productive conversations after 7:30. But my eldest was a very good sleeper. So I could honestly get 3 or 4 hours work done over night time, go to bed at 11 or 12 and get 7 solid hours of sleep, after 3 or 4 hours of work. So, it was mental. But I remember ringing this girl. She didn't necessarily work full time, but just incredibly busy, had a business, had a farm, had 3 kids. And I was just like, any tips? And she went, yeah, don't sleep. And I went, oh, okay, cool. And she goes, no, honestly, like I do a lot of work at night. I take my laptop everywhere. And I said, what about all this, volunteering and, you get asked to be on committees and, rock up to sausage sizzle and bake stalls. And she goes, oh, no, I just get the guilt and I throw money at it. And I went, oh, great idea. And she went, yeah, great idea. So, I want you to bake a cake for a bake stall. And I'd either recruit the girl up the road who had a baking business, or I'd just throw them $50. I mean, I remember hearing a story of a girl who's on a farm north of me. She was a lawyer and she used to travel through to Perth a couple of days a week to work. And school insisted on having these cake stalls. And she said, what's the most money we've ever made from a cake stall? And it was something like $500. She goes, I'll pay you $500 a year never to have a cake stall again. And they were like, oh, but it's not about that. It's about, everyone contributing and the kids seeing the money raised. And she was like, I'm giving you an out. Just take the money. And I think
Oh,
a
my
lot of
goodness.
our traditions are built from, the 40s and 50s and 60s, where that's how they built communities, was by all contributing. But that was their job. Their job was build, leaning into those things and stuff like that. But yeah, it's quite funny, some of the stories you hear around the place, for sure.
Wow. And I've only just, when you say bake sales, we're recording this with the election coming up this weekend. And even last night, there's a tray coming home for you then to put a bake sale on. And can you help out at the sausage sizzle? And all that? It's just like, I would quite gladly give $10, $15
Yeah,
instead of having to bake it. Because I always walk past those bake sales on election going, I don't know what it's like, but I'm not going to buy it. But I'm just like, I would much rather give some money
yeah.
than.
Well, it's even this year, you evolve all the time. So this year we're all playing hockey and the kids are playing Auskick as well in a town up the road. And one of the main fundraisers they have is providing dinners on a Sunday night when all the teams come together after games. And I just thought, oh, there's 5 kind of lots of cooking that I have to do on a Saturday for a Sunday game. So I've outsourced the lot, and it's all going to come in freezer meals, and I'll leave it up at the club rooms and I'll just get it out on the day that I need it, because I don't want to give up Saturdays with my kids, baking a potato bake or a curry or something. And I know how much money it makes for the club, so I understand why they do it. But it's born of a time when you were home on a Friday, for example. But yeah, I think the first time around, my line manager really enabled me and gave me a pathway forward. And I remember at one point we had a couple of people drop out of our team that were working parents. And I said to him, I've just realized that, working parents are our canaries in a coal mine. Like if we're dropping like flies and dying, your organization's poison. So you can say that you've got family friendly policies, you can have all the leave and everything like that. But if you don't have leadership living and breathing it, and you don't have people functioning as a working parent in your organization, you're not doing it very well.
Yeah, 100% agree. And have you seen a change in that? I know you've switched organizations in the last couple of years. Have you seen the role of leaders, I guess, leading by example as parents at all? Because sometimes I speak with people and nothing's changed, sadly.
Yeah, I think it's very culture specific. So, there's a a large farm that I know of that's got a lot of staff, and they're very focused on being family friendly. But even I think they struggle with what that looks like. They
Mm.
are always trying to model it, but having it ingrained in their everyday work processes is something that's probably being built out all the time. The change of egos, where there's just no egos in leadership, and where people, they genuinely care about you, but they also care about your family. And it's quite confronting when I always have come from a place of your metrics and your KPIs, and the questions about family are just a token gesture. And if people think it's true that you have to bring your whole self to work and that's what we should be doing, I mean, it's fraught with danger, because you put that information into the wrong set of hands and they'll poison you. But if you've really got to build up some trust, and it's about who you work for, and not necessarily even who you work with, but who you work for. I used to work with an older guy. He was very blunt, and he had this wonderful policy. It was like a no dickhead policy, and it's
I love
something
those
that,
policies.
and I just love thinking about, right, you are draining my energy. I can't have you in my life anymore. That's it. I'm going to avoid you at all costs. And those kinds of things you just have to do. This new organization is just, it's very refreshing. It's very weird. It's, you get phone calls saying, I really want you to have this weekend off. We've had a really busy season. I want down tools, and I really don't put any delayed send on your emails. Just don't send me emails. And then you go, are you sure? And they go, yeah, no, we are all doing it. And you go, oh, wow, okay, they actually mean it. It's incredibly empowering, but it's still very weird. It's still very
Yeah.
weird.
Are you liking the change from going from a big corporate to a medium business? Like, what are some of those differences that you've noticed? And do they have flexible work and support you as well in your career?
Yeah, I suppose I tested them a lot. We had like a number of coffee interviews, and I used to just throw things out, because there was this leave arrangement in a corporate where you could buy leave, or if you'd been there so long you'd earn extra leave and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of pushed them, and we don't have anything like that. But what do you use that leave for? And I said, to go to sports carnivals because we have to volunteer, or to attend school council meetings or something like that. And he went, oh no, just do that. That's life. We just do that. And I said, well, what's an example? You're a shareholder, you're a director. What's an example of, how you have flexibility? And he just listed off all these things. And so that gave me comfort.
So
But I
you were
still am,
interviewing them through the process as much as they were interviewing. That's awesome. I love to hear that.
yeah. And it's probably born out of a bit of, you hit a point in your life, career age, where you just don't have the energy and the time and the patience to deal with crap anymore. So you get quite blunt. And it's something I'm really proud of, because I used to be a really chronic people pleaser. And a lady said to me that you're very blunt. And I was so proud. I came home and said to my husband, I just got called blunt. And he went, yeah, you not noticed our kitchen table conversations? I went, oh yeah, but that's you. That's a bit different. But yeah, being blunt has been a bit of a evolution that I have enjoyed. The flexible working, I feel like I'm always still pushing the boundary. I mean, just logistically, our school bus doesn't come until 7 minutes past 8. I should probably be at work somewhere between 8 and 8:30, and it's a 45-minute drive. So, I have to reconcile with that. We don't have great phone range all the way to work either. So, quick phone calls, or, I think about, well, I'll just send a few emails before I get the kids on the bus, and then that'll make up for that. But yeah, they're very engaging, sort of asking how they can support. So time will tell, but it's very refreshing.
Yeah, no, that's certainly good. And what have been your biggest challenges as a working mum living in a regional area?
I think there's the isolation of navigating it on your own. I remember sitting down at a fantastic child health nurse, a bit of a local legend, highly recommend her to anyone. And I just said to her, how do I do this? And she said, I don't know, because no one else does. But it's going to be okay. And one of the things she said to me that gave me great comfort was, whatever you present to your kids as normal, they'll accept. And
I
so,
love that concept.
yeah, it was really, really beautiful. And through, at some point, I don't know when, I read a book called Grace Not Perfection. And it's written by an American, Emily Lee, who's like does organizing and planners and stuff, but Grace Not Perfection. So just being ready to respond instead of having everything mapped out perfectly. An old boarding school friend of mine, when I was early pregnant with my first, I went and caught up with her and I said, "Oh, how do you navigate it with your girls?" Now, she is a lawyer. Her husband has an incredibly intense job with lots of travel. And she said, "My kids are young, but I could write a book about all the myriad of models of care that we have orchestrated for our kids. And it's ever evolving." And I went, "Oh," and that kind of set me up to be agile. So I remember once I had a nanny that had come highly recommended, and we know we loved having her. She taught Harley to ride a bike after we'd given up because he was just so frustrating. But she kind of just texted me one day and said, "Oh, I've got other work, and anyway, I can't come tomorrow." I was like, "Oh, what does that mean? So tomorrow ever or just tomorrow?" And it was tomorrow ever. Like, she wasn't coming back.
Oh my
And
God, with like a day. Oh,
not
geez.
even a day. It was 3:30 in the afternoon. I was on the way to daycare pickup. And I was in the busiest season. So there's sort of like a 4 to 5 month period where, we front end a lot of work in my organization and in the industry that I was in. And I was panicking. I rang my mum, like almost hyperventilating. And I said, "What am I going to do?" She goes, "Oh, it's okay. I can come over." I said, "No, you're already doing so much for me. Like, I'm not ringing you to fix this. I just needed to vent." And I decided grace, not perfection. And I walked into daycare with this big smile on my face, and I sat down and played with the kids before I picked them up. So we weren't sort of rushing out the door. And one of the daycare girls came up to me and she said, "Do you still have people come to your house to look after the kids?" And I went, "Yeah." And she goes, "Can I?" And I went, "Yep. Do you want to come tomorrow?" And it just happened like that. And she was a
Wow.
beautiful human being. But because she brought the structure from daycare to our house, it meant that we didn't have those behavioral adjustments when kids have different leaders.
Yeah.
And so she brought the same structure, the same expectations. She knew the rules and she knew how our kids worked. And she stayed for quite a long time. She was studying. So when nap time came, she could study. And it was just, it was one of those times where I'm like, it rewarded this grace, not perfection idea. And it means that, you don't sit there and panic. Like, I could have sat in that car park and, put posts out on social media and rung all my friends. And, lots of people would have stepped up to help, but I needed a perpetual solution, not this one off. And
Mm.
yeah, anyway, it was things like that where you have to be prepared for everything. And when I was in this process of changing jobs, I'd let my cleaner go, I'd let 4 nannies go. I mean, the contribution I made to the regional economy was astounding at
Yeah.
times. But I kept putting a call out to all my farmer friends going, "If you hire a header driver this year that comes with like a partner that's looking for work, can you call me?" And I just kept pestering them. There was so many of them I messaged, or I'd see someone advertise looking for work, looking for header work, traveling with a partner. And I just text them, "Have you got a header driver yet?" And then this guy rang me up and he said, "Yeah, so I've got this guy working for us. He's from Queensland and his partner isn't working at the minute and is probably up for a couple of days a week work." And I went, "Awesome." So she came to visit us and have a coffee. She'd worked in aged care. She had all the clearances. She was so practical. And she came to my house for an hour and a half, cleaned, got the kids off the bus. They did homework, afternoon tea, play, dinner, bath. And by the time I walked in the door, they were ready for bed and we had an hour together. And it was honestly the best transition into a new job. And she was incredibly beautiful. I kept threatening to stab her tires on a caravan so she couldn't go home. Yeah, and if I could bottle her up and have something like that's amazing. But she only was here for 3 months and she was only here for 2 days a week and I needed to blend it again. And then, I was leading into Christmas going, what am I going to do next year? Everyone's going to be at school, so this is going to be better. And I actually approached a lady in town who'd driven our school bus for a long time. Beautiful lady, very practical, hyper involved in the community. And I said, "You wouldn't be interested in coming to my house one day a week and having the kids?" And she said yes before I could finish the sentence. And I went, "Great. Awesome. All right. Awesome. Okay. Thanks. All right. See you next week." So she came out and had a coffee and she comes every Wednesday during the school term.
Wow. So you've just constantly just putting yourself out there and not backwards and coming forward, but you're like, right, I need this and I'm going to find it. And
Yeah.
you just make it happen.
Yeah. And I think also some people don't think about what they can do. Like, there's a great mum at school who's got far too many children and she's always perpetually busy, but sometimes I just text them, can my kids get off at your house today? They walk up the driveway and they're at her house and they get afternoon tea and I can pick them up on the way home. And they love that. They think it's a play date. I mean, I think time's 5 now, and she really has only just worked out that I'm paying people to be friends with her. So she honestly thinks people are just coming to hang out with her because they love her so much. And she's just worked out it's actually a bit of a transaction.
Wow. So you really make it work through a community and so driven to actually make it happen. Through all that, has there anything that's been a real surprise for you of, I guess, navigating being a working mum also in a regional town?
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that I work full time. So I've come to realize this year sort of 2 key things. One, I needed to build a house book, like a house management book, like a house Bible. And I've typed it up and it's got everything in it. So it covers us if we ever have to get a pet sitter in if we go away. It covers us if we have a new nanny. But it also, I'm putting in the kind of schedule for the kids and what's allowed and what's not allowed. There's a snack box on top of the fridge that would empty on certain babysitter days and not empty on others. And, just putting all that in a book meant that when I had to onboard somebody new, it wasn't such a big transition. And it is actually appreciated. One of our babysitters said, I babysit for 3 or 4 families and you're the only one that communicates like this. And I really appreciate it because I forget house to house what the rules are. And, you want to keep the kids happy, but you don't always know where everything is. Like it's even down to how to use the TV remotes and what the Wi-Fi password is and stuff like that. So that's been a really big help. And the other one, I think this year, just with the kids being in full-time school and our business is evolving as well, and we're just about to start some renovations, which I haven't really worked out where we're even going to live during that. But I've kind of decided that it's a season. It's a season that I'm going through, and we've got 4 years of this, and then my eldest will be in high school, and it will change again. And as long as I give myself the grace and talk about it. So language has just become so paramount. So I am not grateful for flexible working. It is 2025. If people don't have flexible working embedded in their organization, they don't deserve the best team. Well, I'm not just, my friends aren't just stay-at-home mums, they're family CEOs. And people aren't grateful for part-time. They do a mix of working and being at home. Because I remember hearing a podcast of a lady, she was a lawyer. She'd only ever worked 2 days a week since returning from having kids, and her kids were late teens at that point, I think. And she said, I had clients for 3 or 4 years that didn't realize I wasn't full time because of the way she'd used language. And I think that has really kind of resonated with me. And I keep saying to people, you don't take maternity leave, you take parental leave because all parents can do it. And it's training. And I remember sitting on a farm meeting once, and the couple that I dealt with predominantly, incredible people, incredible business operators, but their elderly parents were still involved in the farm, which is always interesting. And this lady, she would have been early 80s and a very staunch kind of, farming wife. And she said to me, how many kids do you have? And I told her all the stories, and we're having a bit of a laugh about how direct our youngest is. And she said, oh, when I had kids, I stayed home and looked after them. I said, I would have loved that, to be, bringing up kids in the 70s and 80s when I could have bought a house for 80 grand. And the whole group just kind of stopped. And I was ready for it because I knew that I could just see by the look on her face. She was judging me. And so it's just reminding people that often, and for me, it's not a choice. I mean, we made a decision well before having kids that we had big goals. So this was not, something about me loving my career and having to, but I found a job that fulfills me. It also meets a need in terms of, we're a full-time dual income household, and like it gives me stuff that I didn't expect it to. So I just had to give it time. For example, last year I had to take time to work with me, and we were off to Perth to see a client who had exactly the same age kid as what I did. So she's like, bring her along. And I packed the day. I explained the behavior that I needed. I explained how long we were going to be there. We took toys. Showed her a photo of this little girl so she could get to know her before we got there. And we pulled into the sort of bakery on the way down to Perth. It's a sort of, standard stop for us. And my daughter walked in and ordered a baby chino, and I just looked at her and I went, "Where did you learn to do that?" She goes, "Daycare. You sign
Oh,
that form and we're allowed to go to the cafe and order baby chinos." And I went, "Oh, okay, great." And, the bakery stuff, that was hilarious. And then I got down, I did my meeting, she played, they watched ABC Kids, and we got in the car and got home, and Duncan said to her, "How's your day with mum today?" And she goes, "Yeah, good. I didn't realize all she did was go out for coffee."
yeah.
And I went, "Oh, yeah, I suppose we did today." Yeah,
Oh, it's amazing what kids pick up and think that that's what we do. My
yeah,
youngest son just talks on the phone and goes, "I'm just like dad," because dad talks on the phone all the time.
yeah.
Like it's just because he's talking to clients and that's what he does. But it's funny what they think work is.
Yeah, totally. It's the same, like we try and during the right seasons, if Duncan's out late on a tractor or, in a paddock somewhere, we will try and either do bath time early and do the dinner run and go and have dinner with him out in the paddock, or we'll get up early and, bundle up breakfast and take out so they can actually see him working and he's not choosing to be away from them. He's actually building something for them. And that's how we try and use the language around that so they don't punish him when he comes home. Although our youngest is very good at making him feel incredibly guilty. But yeah, I think
Kids have a
that's
way of
just in
doing that.
nature. Yeah, yeah, totally.
Wow. And have you had any moments that have just gone, right, this is crazy. How can I keep this going? Or have you just like, nah, I just know exactly what I'm going to get done and it just gets done?
I think for the most part, you find more resilience than you realize you have. So, I did the whole boarding school thing and had to transition through, those emotions of homesickness. And, I learned early on, everything's better if you just sleep on it. So, if you have a really hard day, you just try and go to bed really early and sleep on it because if you wake up, it's a fresh start. Um, I read the Let Them book recently and that really resonated. It was a bit
I
of a
want to
page
read
turner.
that. That sounds amazing. The Mel Robbins, if you're wanting
Yeah,
to look at it. Yep.
yeah. And one of my line managers once told me about this fable. It's called the We'll See fable. And it's a way of just approaching every scenario with it could be bad, it might not be. We'll see. And so every time something came up, I just try to pause and reflect and choose my reaction and figure it out later and realize that the stresses that we put ourselves under are often something that we build out ourselves. I could say to myself, "I'm so stressed, I've got this on that." And he goes, "Yeah, you kind of done it to yourself. If you realize that you haven't been sleeping well, you're not eating well, and you're saying yes to too many things, and just say no and create a bit of space for yourself." And I think that's been something that I've learned over the time. But there's certainly been times, especially when you're getting the constant sick days from nannies that you thought you had lined up, or the daycare sicknesses that just seem to come in so many waves. We were so sick last 2 years, 2 Decembers ago, that we missed, swimming lessons and the school concert and all that. We were 3 weeks, we were just completely out and out, and the memory of it now, but it was hell. We had all sorts of things, constant trips to the chemist. And, we choose to engage with a GP that's down in Perth who's really fantastic. But I remember having an awful night, booking an appointment online and then packing them up and driving there and back, 2 hours there, 15-minute appointment, 2 hours back. But from that, if we got sick again, I knew I could do phone appointments and get the support I needed. And she knew my kids and how they had got, how sick they'd been in the past and stuff like that. And she said to me once, because I took all this evidence of why they were really sick, and she goes, "I don't need that. If you're going to drive that far to get to me, it must be bad." And I was like, "Yeah, it must be bad. Yep. Okay, thanks."
You are so resilient and you have a really strong mindset. Where does that come from? Or what has given you that courage?
Oh, it's like building a house. So I never used to be like this. I think that I've built it up over time, and it's just experiences that give you that over time. I mean, when you think about it, 1 to 2 children. The first time I went back from parental leave, I was panicking about how I was going to ruin my child, and then a daycare lady came up to me and she said, "I just want to let you know how beautiful your son is. He's done this, this, and
Oh,
this." And I went, "Oh, thanks." And I sent a little joking message to my friend that night going, "Oh, I bet you they do that to all the parents." And she goes, "I've never had that." I went, "Oops."
yeah.
So you're sharing your kid with other people and you realize that, it's not all bad. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I mean, that's pretty true. there's often things that you go through, and you're building up bricks over time, and you also learn to not let other people affect you. I think there was lots of expectations when school started about how things should be done, and I just didn't have the capacity, and so I figured out different ways. And I think if the more grace you give other people, the more grace they can give you as well. And it's definitely a bit of a working cycle. I mean, we haven't even entered things like tech or teenagers, or even really big things. Like a lot of my friends' kids have motorbikes, and our eldest would love one, but I need to navigate how that looks for us in terms of what boundaries we want to put in that. And I don't have the headspace for that now, so it's probably just going to wait till next year.
Yeah. So speaking of headspace, how do you manage the mental load and all the planning and the logistics that go on between you and your husband?
I reckon I've had a bit of a dream to be an organizational consultant since the dawn of time. I love being organized. So that stuff is quite easy for me. I just lean into it. And, I've just consumed a lot of podcasts, and I used to ask a lot of friends. The friend of mine down the road that has far too many children, I think there's 7 of them. I rang her one day and I was like, so I'm going back to work. How do you do it? And, you always seem to appear in the shop car park in town relatively intact, and I want to know how you do that. And she gave me some great tips. So she doesn't meal plan, but she has mince on Tuesdays and chicken on Thursdays. And so she said, if I get up in the morning, I just get that meat out and then we make something, that afternoon. And she said, you only really need to raise your first 2 because then they'll raise the rest. And it's true, like I put a lot of skills and time into our eldest, and we had speech problems with him. We took a long time to kind of get him in a really articulate manner ready for school. And I remember sitting there listening to him coach our youngest because she wasn't saying things correctly at 18 months old. He was pulling her up and explaining to her how she should be saying it. So there's things like that. In the early days, though, it was very much, I bought double of everything, and we couldn't afford to leave a water bottle at daycare 45 minutes away. So there's 2 water bottles, 2 hats. There's always a change of clothes in the car that I change every season and size. We get a lot of hand-me-downs, so, managing that and having them all in packing cubes ready to go. Meals often in the freezer. We use a bit of the slow cooker, probably not as much as what we should. I hate food. If someone came in and took over food in my life, the buying, the preparing, the cleaning, I love that.
Yeah.
I do a lot of online shopping. So anything that can be bought online gets bought online, whether it's from local businesses or not. Everything gets posted up. I, for a long time, used to get all my stuff posted to my mum and dad. So they'd deal with the rubbish. They'd bring me the stuff when they came to babysit. And you'd usually get there a week quicker than when I got it. A lot of our things that get set up on direct debit. I mean, with my husband's business, I do all the bookwork. So, I made sure I used a cloud-based program for that. I make sure I'm upskilling and getting the most out of that program to make things quicker and easier. If you go on a play date, you book it at 4 o'clock, take pajamas, and you do bath and dinner there, and then come home and straight into bed. I used to outsource a lot too. I had a beautiful cleaner well before I had kids, and she stayed on, and she used to do things for me that she doesn't do for other people, which was very cool. And, I just said everybody needs a Nancy in their life. And it's one thing that I think is easy to outsource, but it's really important because you come home to a sort of a refreshed mind. I use a lot of tech, so enjoying using AI at the minute to make things a bit easier. But reminders, I have annual reminders, book the spider spray, prepare the tax, book week's coming up, order a costume online, all of that kind of stuff. I'm trying to campaign pretty hard in my school, though they're not really coming on board, about fundraising to put all the costumes in the library to match the library books at school. So we never do book week
Oh, that
from
sounds
home.
amazing.
Imagine not having to do it, but still getting the awesome photos of them all dressed up.
Yeah.
And then I also set up systems. So I try not to think about the list of stuff. If I, every morning we get up, we make lunch boxes first because it's the thing I hate the most. But if it's done early, we tend to not be rushing out the door. I have a set me up Sunday list that changes whether it's winter or summer based on the jobs I do for the week. When the kids were little, I had 7 baskets on top of their chest of drawers, and I'd pack the clothes based on the weather for the day and where we were going. And then I used to also, like, my mum had a full setup of kids stuff at her house, clothes, beds, everything. So whenever they went there, I never had to pack. But otherwise, like with sport, we have bags at the wall the training, for the games, and everything's packed immediately, goes straight from the washing line into those bags. So we are never looking for the water bottle, the hat, the shoes, the shin pads, whatever. It's all packed, and there's a lot of lists that go around. I use probably Apple at home and Microsoft at work. But there is often times where I'll just sit down and do what I call a calendar audit. So I'll make sure everything from my work calendar, and it's confidential, so I have to write it differently, but everything's there and then is in my electronic home calendar. And then I have a written one on the wall. And I nearly stopped doing it last year because I didn't think my husband was reading it, but I think he does occasionally. But my eldest now gets it off the wall and says, "What's this here?" And he tries to sound out the words and read. And I said, "Oh, I'm going to a conference in Perth, and Gran and Mate are coming over to have you." And he goes, "Oh, and is that the day that I go to hockey training?" I went, "No, because that's a Friday." And so he's actually learning about the logistics. And our old bus driver said to me once, when he was only pre-primary, he's very good at knowing who's getting him off the bus and, what's happening for the day. So I think they're skills that I'm pretty proud that they've got already. But I generally map out a fortnight in advance. Set me out Sundays are pretty important. And I often will book a reset day, which might just be a Saturday at home where I just fill everything up, figure out what I have to book in, what are we running out of, whose birthdays are coming up. A birthday present box. A mum gave me that idea once. We just have a massive box of birthday presents and we never buy cards and birthday presents because they're always there. And then the kids can just wrap and go.
You are so organized. I've got all these ideas and tips and things like that from just that one question. That is amazing. Thank you so much.
The other one of my friends got, it's very handy. When you get married, you need to think of these things if you want to change your name or what name your kids are going to have. So we're very lucky that our kids don't have the same surname as anybody else in any of the communities that we roll around in. So I can just do one lot of name tags on everything and I know it'll always come home. I feel for those with cousins down the road with the same surname and they end up with the wrong clothes and hats and things coming back.
Oh my goodness. So before we wrap up, is there any other final tips or experiences that you'd like to share about being a working mum?
I think there's so many, like the girl math stuff that's going around in socials. We can justify anything that we want to do, but there's so many positives in you working, whether that be, maintaining your superannuation balance. So the financial freedom you have in retirement is there, to setting examples for your kids in terms of what a household can manage and how a mum and dad can work together, to achieve things. And I remember having a wine catch up with a great friend of mine, and she works incredibly hard and she supports her husband's work on their farm, but she doesn't have a salaried role. And, her kids were getting older and said, Dad earns all the money. And, I think her husband sat down and just sorted it all out pretty quickly. But, she said, at least you won't have that issue because we've really had to pull our kids up on that about what different forms of work look like. So the positives in working are just there. And if you want to find the negatives, you will. But you often don't recognize those positives until after you've been in there for a while or, when you're looking back. And it's things around, our eldest did daycare and managed it quite well. But when we started school, it was a really big challenge for him. And I look back and think, gosh, if I hadn't have done daycare, we would have had 10 or 12 weeks of, working through that, supporting him. Whereas it probably only lasted 3 or 4 weeks and it was very light, but I could recognize the behaviors because we'd seen it when he was, 18 months old at daycare. So just preparing them for life, but also looking back and recognizing the road you've traveled. I mean, going from 1 to 2, returning from second parental, it was so much easier. So just, making sure you recognize, and I talk about this concept in a few different ways, but an honor roll of what you've achieved and having that recorded so that you can see where you've come from, because it feels hard because it is hard. But we say to our kids all the time when they don't want to do something, we can do hard things.
Yeah, 100%. And what a great way to finish. Now, Lisa, what do you do to fill your cup and for a bit of self-care?
I'm terrible. I have only just started getting back into my sport and seeing friends a little bit more through that, but love a good sleep in. and I love a good afternoon nap when it happens on the weekends. During the right weather, I do a lot of walking at night with my headlamp and the dog out on the tracks around our place and down the road. So that's sort of something where I just get out. It's generally because my husband sent me a million kind of links. Oh, this podcast's really good. You got to listen to it. And he doesn't realize that I have to listen to the playlist in the car because my daughter's into her singing. So, for me to catch up on podcasts, I go for a walk. That's definitely something.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing your experiences as a working mum, also living and working in a regional town where your nearest help is 100 kilometers away, which to us is like in the city folk is like, that's a long way away. And you're like, it's only 100 Ks. So, I guess we just need to drop a zero or divide everything by 10 probably. And
Yeah.
then that's like normal life for you. But thank you so much. I have to say, I could actually keep talking to you about this so much more. And I know we're both pretty passionate about working mums and providing them that support and encouragement. So I have to say, thank you so much for replying to my LinkedIn post of when I did it a few months ago. And yeah, really appreciate it. And thank you so much and best of luck going forward.
Thank you, Karina. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to the Working Mama podcast. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast catcher. Please also feel free to contact me on any of the Working Mama social channels. Remember, Mama is MUMMA, or website www.workingmama.com.au. I would appreciate you to share this podcast with friends and colleagues, especially those that are parents managing the juggle. And I would really appreciate if you had to take the time out to leave a review of the podcast. Thank you and see you next time. Have a great week.